But we've heard an awful lot about this 400,000 water park weekend that our public school managers, the Department of Public Instruction, put on. And initially, it was the price tag that was the shock. $400,000 to go to Chula Vista to do something. It's now the something that they were doing that is the problem. They got together, spent an awful lot of money to rework state tests to lie to parents, to make it seem like kids could read or write or do math better than they actually are. But that's not the only problem. This story has now grown legs of its own, and it continues to show that the people who manage public schools in Wisconsin don't want parents, taxpayers, lawmakers, really anybody to know anything about what's going on. There is a lawsuit that may, hopefully, change that. Here to talk to us about the lawsuit, Jake Curtis with the Institute for Reforming Government. Jake, thanks so very much for calling us this morning. Appreciate you joining the show.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm having my coffee because that was a wild storm last night.
Did you get the wind or did you get the sirens? Which one woke you up?
We got the sirens. So my wife and I are not nervous Nellies, but we actually took the kids in the basement. And, we probably should do something. We probably shouldn't sit here during the alarm. So
my wife had the kids and the dog in the basement, and I was still sound asleep because if I'm gonna go, at least get me before I go to work. I don't want to drive to work and die in the storm on the way to work. You could at least take me in my sleep. Talk to me.
That's a good point.
Talk to me about this lawsuit. How much, if anything, does this lawsuit have to do with the $400,000 water park weekend? And talk to me about how this is directly related to what the public school managers here in the state did to hide from parents the truth about how their kids are doing when it comes to reading and writing and math.
Yeah, so on the one hand, it has everything, but to do with that weekend or that workshop. But on the other hand, it's a lot more significant, as you alluded to. It's a lot more than just the dollars and cents. So I guess let's rewind. In June of 2024, there was a workshop put on by DPI in Wisconsin Dells, as you said, at the Chula Vista, and that's what got a lot of the headlines early on. Is we worked with the Dairyland Sentinel, who had really been on this for a while. I'll even go further back, though. IRG put in public records request early April, I believe, of 2024, because Quentin Claiborne at IRG kind of had some concerns and some questions as to what exactly DPI was doing with these cut scores, right? So all the students in Wisconsin third grade through eighth grade, and then high school, they take the forward exam, the pre-ACT, and then the ACT. And then based on those scores, there's essentially a measure of how kids are doing in Wisconsin schools. And this workshop was essentially set up to refigure the cut scores and to essentially rename them. And the problem, I think, from a policy standpoint is that was lowering expectations. You weren't going to have an apples-to-apples comparison of how your kid was doing from previous years. So we submitted a public records request. We put out a report in, I believe, October of 2024. They kind of highlighted this problem. Well, credit to Brian Fraley. He kind of stuck with this. And because he wanted to know what exactly happened at this workshop, who was there, how much was spent, and he just wasn't getting answers. We helped him and we pushed, and finally we got all the records and exposed essentially that DPI had set up this workshop in secret. Because again, we get these records after the fact. The public didn't know this workshop happened, It was a price tag, yes, as you alluded to. $400,000 seems pretty extreme at Chula Vista. But the bigger problem, Benjamin, and I think this is really why this story caught really fire across the state, and that is attendees were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, couldn't put anything on social media. I mean, theoretically, they're still under these NDAs and can't talk about them. And the public deserves to know. And those who attended at least should have the right to discuss what was debated and why exactly these cut scores were lowered.
This wasn't a meeting where we as reporters simply didn't choose to go. That happens all the time. Blow off a meeting, it's on the weekend, I'm not working Saturdays. This was a meeting that was designed to be held in as much secret as it can. We're talking with Jake Curtis. He's with the Institute for Reforming Government. They filed a new lawsuit challenging this entire secret meeting process. Jake, what are the chances that this lawsuit ends with these lowered test scores? And I'm going to steal Dan O'Donnell's line for this, the water park test scores. What are the chances that this lawsuit ends with those test scores being erased, or at least having an order that, okay, the Department of Public Instruction has to hold a public meeting, make the exact same case that they made behind closed doors, and take a public vote?
Sure. Well, I'll just give a little background on process. I mean, technically, this is, I know it's confusing because what we did was filed a verified complaint, is what it's called, with the Adams County District Attorney under the Open Meetings Law in Wisconsin. If you have a concern with a possible open meetings violation, you can file a verified complaint with either the Attorney General or the district attorney of where from the county in which the alleged violation took place. So in this case, Chula Vista is in Adams County. It's not at this stage like a circuit court complaint. Essentially, it's a complaint with the DA. We've certainly working with Tom Kamenik at an institute that does a tremendous work, Wisconsin Transparency Project. We filed the complaint almost in a kind of a circuit court action framing, but we filed it with the DA. She has 20 days to actually look at this. We filed it last Friday. So she has 20 days to look at this. If she doesn't do anything, then we have the right to essentially bring a circuit court action on behalf of the state. And if the DA in Adams County doesn't do anything with this, doesn't think this was a violation, we certainly plan on moving forward with the litigation. And then I think you're hitting on the critical point is, in this scenario, if a circuit court were to look at this and determine that, yes, this was a meeting that should have been publicly noticed, that DPI had gotten together, consolidated all these officials and staff from across the state, put them together in a workshop, and then relied on their recommendation to make that decision, that should have been a publicly noticed meeting. It's conceivable that a judge could look at this and decide that the action taken by DPI was illegal and essentially unwind that action and require DPI to renotice it. And that's not even case law. That's state statute. That's straight from Wisconsin Chapter 19. So that is a distinct possibility here if a court looks at this and decides that this meeting should have been publicly noticed.
I will get you out on this question because, and I understand as a lawyer, never ask a question you don't know the answer to, and never ask too broad of a question. So I will make this one simple. Am I making too much of what appears to be a dangerous pattern of secrecy and lies from the Department of Public Instruction? They lied about what was going on at this water park weekend. They fought you and Brian Fraley for just the basics. I mean, the price tag alone, they've required everybody who was there to sign a non-disclosure. And you add that to what came out of the Cap Times investigation, that it appears the Department of Public Instruction has gone out of its way to hide or lie to parents about what's happening with sexual misconduct and grooming. I think that, yes, this is absolutely about $400,000 at Chula Vista. Absolutely. This is about lowering the test scores to make it look like Wisconsin kids are reading and writing better than they actually are. But to me, this comes back to a culture, if that's the right word, an insistence, if that's the right word, from our public school managers of silence and secrecy, of moms and dads don't deserve to know this, shut up, don't ask us any questions. And to me, even if this does not end, even if the legal action or a potential lawsuit doesn't end with us getting honest test scores, forcing the Department of Public Instruction to be honest and open about what it does, that is a victory. Am I making too much of it in accusing DPI of being secretive and lying to parents?
Not at all. And it's clear that whether it's intentional or not, I don't know the internal workings at DPI, but there clearly is a pattern. And I think you're hitting on an important point. First, look, I was chief legal counsel at Wisconsin DNR under Governor Walker, kind of working with the board. Certain agencies have boards. Working with the board was one of my tasks. I always tell this story. When I got there, one of the key questions was, hey, we have a Christmas party for the board, right? The members got together at a restaurant. They had a Christmas party. They sat around. They talked about what they were doing that holiday. They had a meal, and that was about it. The question was, do we publicly notice that? And at first, it's kind of almost laughable. And you know what? We did. We decided, look, we have a quorum of the board. I certainly advised them not to talk shop, and they didn't. But look, there's always like kind of that concern. Everybody's together. And look, let's just err on the side of caution. And you know what? We honestly had somebody show up and sit there for 5 minutes and see that the board was having a meal, and he left. But my point in that story is we always, at least when I was there, we erred on the side of caution. Let the public know. And if they want to show up, great. That's something they can do. And clearly the concern here is that DPI, there seems to be a pattern of not informing the public. And I think most critically on issues that the public really cares about. You and I have been involved in, monitoring local government. I've always said I think the toughest job in government, and this is not hyperbole, I think the toughest job in government is being on a school board or being a superintendent. Those are really, really tough jobs, and it's because people care about education policy because it's their kids, right? Ultimately, that's why people are so passionate. They want their kids to do well. They want to know that their kids are either doing well or falling behind. And so when DPI makes a decision like this in secrecy, they can say that this was transparent. All these records we reviewed were after the fact. The public didn't know. So when this is done in secrecy about something that parents and Wisconsinites really care about, it's a problem. And when you have a pattern, it's something that needs to be exposed.
Look, the government that's closest to home is the government that's the most important, and government is real in cops and snowplows and schools. And you're exactly right. And when you go out of your way to hide that, it's not just mom didn't want to go down to the school board meeting on Tuesday. You hid it so that she couldn't. Jake, I appreciate it, man. We'll be following up with this. And let us know when we hit that 20-day mark. And as we go forward, I'm sure we'll have you back on and talk about it some more. Jake Curtis, Institute for Reforming Government. Appreciate it, Jake. Thanks so very much.
Thanks, Benjamin.